Good morning, everybody. Before moving to the topic directly, let's have a look on this photograph. As you can see here, there is a group of women with smiling faces who are engaged in some kind of collective activity. As the literature says, women are the most initiative role when it comes to the collective action-based activities. And my research also all about women and their willingness to engage in collective action-based activity groups. So let's move to the topic. The topic is psychosocial factors predicting the willingness of rural women to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups, a study with reference to farm household in Mahakanumulla 10 Cascade system. And this is the overview of my presentation, and let's move to the introduction. While my research is important, I'll explain you. Economic empowerment of rural women is one of the essential elements when it comes to the well-being of rural households. But in the rural context, a woman has so many barriers to become an empowered woman as an individual. So let's see some of those kind of barriers. So the less accessibility to inputs, capital, credit, as well as gender matters and the household chores. And the concept of collective income earning opportunities will be a great solution for those kind of barriers and get rid of and become an empowered. So the strategy of the profit-oriented self-help groups can be introduced to become women as a group of empowered people. So the term of profit-oriented self-help group means a small group of women connected to each other through close social ties and form themselves into a group with a structure which is acceptable by all members and to make profit by pooling resources. In a nutshell, we can express the profit-oriented self-help group is mobilizing social capital to earn money. So let's see the general objective of my research to investigate the psychosocial factors predicting the willingness of rural women to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups with reference to selected agrarian villages in Mahakanumulla 10 Cascade system. And the specific objectives of my research is to identify the level of willingness of rural women to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups and to test whether the attitudes, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control affect the willingness of rural women to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups. And let's move to the conceptual framework. This is basically based on the Edson's theory of planned behavior, but this conceptual framework is an extended version of the original theory. So the attitudes are the individual's measures of favorable, unfavorable evaluation to perform a behavior. In here, I have divided attitudes into two parts, attitudes toward the benefits of the business and the attitudes toward the collective action. And the subjective norms also, individuals' measures of social pressure to perform a behavior or not to perform. It also I have divided into two parts. And the perceived behavioral control is a person's ability to perform a behavior or not to perform. So it also I have divided into two parts. So all those variables will measure the willingness of rural women to engage in profit-oriented self-help group. So let's move to the methodology. Under the methodology, I'll first discuss with you about the selecting the study area and the sampling. Simple random sampling was practiced as the sampling method, and the sample was 95 adult women from 4 villages from Mahakanumulla 10 Cascade system. As you can see here, Kudakanumulla, Semmukulama, Mahakanumulla and Mavatulawa were the 4 villages where I have selected the respondent women. And as the second part of the methodology, I have considered about the questionnaire development. In my questionnaire, there are 2 parts, and the first part is consisted with information of the respondent, including demographic factors, household characteristics, and preferred collective income earning opportunities. And the second part is consisted with measuring the psychosocial factors predicting the willingness of rural women to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups. And the third part of the methodology is discussing about the data collection and data analysis. When talking about the data collection, telephone surveys and support of the trained enumerators were practiced to collect my data. And when talking about the data analysis, SPSS and Smart PLS2 softwares were used basically, and partially square structural equation modeling was employed when the data analysis process. And let's move to the results and let's discuss. So, when talking about the sample profile, I'll explain you about the demographic characteristic of the sample as the first. So, the mean age of the adult respondent was 14 years old, and 96% of adult respondents have been educated up to O levels and above the O levels. So, when talking about the employment engagement, 62.32% of adult women have been engaged in farming as their employment. And when talking about the household characteristic, the family size of the average family size is with 4 members as sheltered as a nuclear family. When talking about the economic status of the families, these values are quite less than the values which are mentioned in the statistic and census reports. So, let's talk about the preferred collective income earning activities. Among compost preparation, preserved food production, poultry production, and mushroom production, so the 85.3% of women have selected collective compost preparation as the most demanding collective income earning activity. And one of the most important objective of my research is measuring the level of the willingness. So, according to the construct means, which was measured by the 3-point Likert scale, there could be seen a high willingness among the villagers of Mahakanumulla Cascade system, especially women, have shown a higher willingness to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups. So let's move to the model development and validation with partially square structural equation modeling. In here, the first exploratory factor analysis was done to determine the factor structure and identify the latent constructs. And secondly, modified the conceptual theory of plant behavior. And thirdly, assess the measurement model with confirmatory factor analysis. And finally, estimate the structural model with path analysis. When talking about the measurement model, it is consistent with one endogenous variable, which is willingness to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups, and yielded with 7 exogenous variables. So these exogenous variables are derived from the main 3 variables: attitude, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control. That is why I have mentioned in the beginning, this is an extended version of theory of plant behavior. So when talking about the model estimation, the criteria under unidimensionality, construct reliability, convergent validity, vulnerability assessment, so those measures were fulfilled up to the threshold level in the my model, and so the model was acceptable and a reliable model. So the predictive validity of the model is the psychosocial factors included in the model could predict 39.3% of variance in women's willingness to engage in profit-oriented self-help groups. So let's move to the hypothesis testing. In here, the 3 hypotheses have been proven, and the one hypothesis is attitudes toward the benefits of engaging in a group business positively influences the willingness of engaging profit-oriented self-help groups. And the second one is perceived risk of being subject to jealousy negatively influence the willingness to engage in profit-oriented self-help group. And the last one is perceived behavioral control to engage in collective action positively influence the willingness to engage in profit-oriented self-help group. And further discuss about the identified psychosocial factors, the women who have higher attitudes toward the self-worth as a women and the contribution to the household income, they have expressed a higher willingness, as well as the women who have high confidence in team spirit in every member and dispute resolution, they also have expressed a higher willingness to engage in such kind of activity groups. And finally, the women who have less fear of being subject to jealousy, they also have expressed a higher willingness to engage in these kind of profit-oriented self-help groups. So let's move to the conclusion and recommendation. I can conclude my whole research as there is a high willingness to engage in profit-oriented self-help group among the women of Mahakanumulla and Cascade system, and the validity of the modified theory of planned behavior model could be ensured, as well as the modified theory of planned behavior model. I identifies dimensions of attitude, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control. And three psychosocial factors were identified as attitudes toward the benefits in engaging group business, perceived behavioral control in collective action, perceived risk of being subject to jealousy. As the recommendation, I can recommend for the development authorities can explore the possibility to get the rural women to initiate the profit-oriented self-help group with the study population since there is a high willingness to welcome this concept and address the identified psychosocial factors in rural training programs also increase the participation in collective income earning opportunities among the region. And the proposed model can be used to assess the pull and push factors of women engagement in collective income earning activities. And finally, with the cross-cultural validation, the model can be adapted to similar studies. So those are the references. Here we comes to the end of my presentation and thank you.